front for all 10 cars for 80 people, whatever. But at a big red door, that's what you came in. But since then, the demographics of the church have changed, and now it's about an average of 2 people per car that come, and there are actual couples that will bring each their own car to church. So many of these churches had to expand the parking in the back. That would be my guess is what happened at First Church. I noticed at First Church, we went there this morning accidentally, first. And my guess is that you have all the senior visitor parking. And we would have parked there, but I'm not a senior yet. I was a visitor, but not a senior visitor. So we parked down below. And my guess is they originally had that upper parking, but then later added the lower parking. That's what they did in Pennsylvania. They added the parking in the back. Well, when they added the parking in the back, all the church members entered in through the back door. And because nobody came in the front door, they never unlocked the front door. And so when we showed up there the first time to go to church there, it was the closest church to where we live, we went to the front door. And we're like, it is Saturday, right? This church is meeting. I mean, they haven't shut down, right? We didn't see all the cars in the back because we parked right out front. And so, yeah, that was our...
Well, then we did go to the back, and then there's nobody there. And then we missed the side door.
Yeah.
Because it was just like nothing, no signage.
Yeah, Jimmy's experience was our first experience at that church. So yeah, okay. So we're going to follow that. So before the service even begins, before the service, before we even come to church, you're showing hospitality before you even show up. And there's several different ways you do that. The first is your church's image. What do I mean by the church's image? It is the image of your church that is being portrayed to the community. What does the community see about your church? What are you communicating about who you are as a church visually to the community? Right? This could be, so your community is making judgments about your church based on the image that they see. Right? Things that they see. It could be any kind of media, any kind of signage, how you have your property designed, trees cut, everything. What do they see? It's an old image may not clearly reflect your church's current identity. Right? What does that mean? So, okay, let's say part of your image is your website. Do you have a church website? Every Adventist church in North America has one provided for them by the North American Division. And it's a default one that they just put your information in there. You have the ability to assign someone access to update that information. And many churches got somebody in the 90s or early 2000s to update the information, to put stuff on there, but the church is no longer the church that it was then. And so when people see the images on the website, is that the church that they see today? Is that who you are? In the graphics that you provide, the graphics on the screen, the images that you have in Sabbath school, the bulletin images that you have, the stuff on your website, does that portray who you are as a church? Do you have images of all these young kids and young families, but your church is a bunch of old people? Or is it all a bunch of old people that are white, but your church is filled with diversity, all these different ethnic groups? Does your image reflect who you are as a church? If it's not, what can you do to be more honest about who you are? That doesn't mean you're not trying to reach other people, but if you say, well, we want to be relevant, so let's portray us as this multi-ethnic church. And so people say, wow, look at there's all these different ethnic groups that are coming to this church, and they come and they're like, it's all one color here. Be honest. Is your image reflecting your identity? A compelling image will increase your church's advertising or evangelism results. So update it. So some churches, and I don't remember when, it was before my time, I think it was in the 70s, the General Conference got a great deal on church signage. And every Adventist church had those 3 angel signs out front. And that was state-of-the-art, modern, amazing, and great for the 60s or 70s, whenever it came out. There are churches that still have that. Unfortunately, there are only 2 angels left, and one of them is on a dive downward because the sign is so old. Maybe it's time to update the sign. One of the churches I pastored, their sign was wooden, and it was made by a member of the church back in the early 80s. And it was a beautiful sign in the 80s. But in 1999, when I was pastoring there, that sign had really gotten worn out through all the weathering in the Pacific Northwest of Washington State. So we had to change the sign. And that was a big issue because Brother so-and-so put a lot of effort into that sign. But that sign was out front, and it's communicating to our community. It's sending a message. And when it was a horrible sign that had been painted like 15 times, and it had all the colors of the rainbow on the sign, I'm saying it is probably not communicating to the community what we're trying to communicate by having a rainbow sign. You'll get it. Number 4. A professional image invigorates the church, its members, its enthusiasm, and its ownership. For those of you that are members of this church, you come in and there's a sense of pride in the beauty of this facility, right? And you should. That's a good thing. It's nice. 30 years, 40 years from now, what will it be like then? Will it still be that way? 30, 40 years from now, if nobody keeps it up, they'll wish they had this then. So and I'm speaking to everybody, those present, great facility here, and those online and those visiting from other churches. I was only in the lobby of Knoxville First. Like went in, looked at the bulletin, wrong church, and then came here. So I went through the parking lot and into the little lobby space there, and then came. Yeah, I actually wished I'd had the time because then I might have been able to do that. I actually thought when I found out my son and his girlfriend were able to come, I actually thought about sending them in ahead and doing a little evaluation, but I chose not to do that, so I'm all straightforward today. So I got enough stories without them. The image, this is anything in print, your bulletins, your signage, inside and outside signage, your websites, all of the stuff that portrays who you are as a church to the community. What is it saying? What are you communicating? The second aspect of this is the physical plant. The physical plant. We're talking about the church's general upkeep and cleanliness. Again, that's not an issue here at this church. We've walked around, been around. Y'all are doing really great. It's nice and it's a lot easier when your church is brand new. But how long have you guys been in this sanctuary here? I know you had that back there. 2 years? All right. So come 8 years, right? 6 years from now, we'll see how we're doing, how you're keeping it up, right? Because things start to wear down. But everybody else, and the churches that are joining us online, the church's general upkeep and cleanliness is important. Walking into the facility and activating literally all of your senses. So what does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? Those are all important factors when coming in. Let me share with you an illustration of a church that I walked into a few years back. When you walk into the lobby, right in the lobby, there was this big, maybe 5 foot in size stain right in the middle of the lobby. And so I come walking in with the pastor, and I'm like, whoa, what's this? He said, oh, the steeple got moved during a windstorm, and it caused a crack, and it leaked. I'm like, oh, what, did that just happen? He's like, oh, no, that happened like 5 years ago. I'm like, what about this stain? He's like, we've tried to get rid of that stain. What about just throwing a carpet over the top of it? A really nice, contrasting, colorful carpet. Oh, I'd never thought of that. Here's the general rule. When something has been out of place, you notice it right off. But after 5 times, you no longer notice it because that's how it is. You no longer notice how it smells or what it looks like. Let me give you a case in point. Let's say today I finished with this HDMI cable that I'm hooking up here, and I decide I'm just going to set it when I'm done with it because I don't know where it belongs. I'm just going to set it right here on this pew. So next Sabbath, somebody comes in and they see the the HDMI cable there, and they know it does not belong there. It's not where it belongs. But they don't know where it belongs, so they're not going to mess with it. And maybe somebody put it there because they're planning on using it later in the service, so they don't touch it. The next Sabbath, they come along, they see, oh, still there. Clearly somebody didn't put it there. I'm going to see who's responsible for that to see it gets back wherever it belongs. But they get sidetracked by something else. After 5 weeks, they see that. Their mind says that's where it belongs. I mean, they don't think that's where it belongs. That's where it's always at. So it just stays there. So does that garbage outside, the tall grass, the stains, the bad paint job, the broken windows, all of those things. You notice it the first time, but after 5 times, that's just the way it is, and you don't notice it anymore. That's why in the sermon I talked about if Gabriel showed up, what would you do? Because if I told you Gabriel the angel was literally going to come, you would walk through the church and see it through Gabriel's eyes. And you would then say, oh, this is stuff we need to fix. This is stuff we need to do. Now, my wife Andre and I have just purchased a home in Niles, Michigan, just south of Berrien Springs, Michigan. And very excited. It's a wonderful home. It's a 20-year-old home built by the original owners that we bought it from. It was 5 acres. They sold the house and half of that, 2.4 acres to us. They kept the other, and they're going to build a smaller home for themselves on the other acreage. So they've lived in it for 19 years. And we're about ready to move into it, and we're walking through, and we're seeing it with fresh eyes. So we're choosing to fix everything that needs fixed before we move in. Because once we move in, it ain't ever getting fixed. I see a lot of wives going, yeah, tell him about that. Sorry, guys, I did not mean to set you up for failure. My bad, I'll take it. But that's just the reality of that. You don't notice what that bathroom smells like. You don't notice what things smell like, look like, hear like, the sounds. You don't notice them anymore. I remember I was in a church, and it was a round sanctuary, and it had windows all the way around. And there were airplanes that flew over all the time. And if you were a guest, you're like, but the members, they didn't hear it, they didn't see it. That's just the way that it was. All right, second point is your church signage, both inside and out. If people don't know, if people are not members of your church, they don't know where to go. Right? They don't know how to get somewhere. How do they know where your church is? How do they know that this is your church? And when they drive onto the property, how do they know where to go? Do they know where the front entrance is? For many of our churches, you have multiple entrances. Right? Your church members come in a wide variety of ways. Your guests want to know where is the front entrance. They don't want to come in the back door. Right? Because they don't know what's going on there. They want to come in where they're going to be recognized that I'm here and I'm new. They don't want to catch somebody off guard, surprise, because they're don't have backstage at passes or whatever. So if you have a visual front door, that should be the front door. If that's not the visual front door and you want somebody to go in somewhere else, then you have signage to direct them where to go. So at Beltsville, where I just left, we had a front door, but they had completely redid the road in front. And when they completely redid the road in the front, nobody used the front door because the parking was arranged and the front was arranged in a way that people were now coming in the back door. Well, our greeters weren't stationed in the back door. They were stationed in the big lobby in the front. So when a guest showed up, they would drive on and they don't know, should I go all the way around to the front? Should I go in the side or should I go in the back? Well, if they see everybody going in the back, they're going to go in the back. But when they walk in, there's nobody there. So we created signage to encourage everybody to come in the front door, regardless of where they parked, to come in the front door. And then we stationed greeters also in the back door, just in case somebody slipped in that way. But church signage, both inside and out. We put, so here's inside. One of the most important signs that you can put up is where the bathrooms are located. All right, ladies, I'm going to do you a favor. If a woman does not know where to go, she will not go. She's not going to get up and wander around to try to find a place to go. So provide signage so she knows. People want to know, when they show up at a new location, they want to know two things. Where's the main sanctuary and where's the bathroom? And you should have signage to direct worship area, sanctuary, whatever your terminology is, and restrooms. So we designed a church to when you walk in, all that information is displayed in signs where to go. I remember we were putting up signs in one of my churches, and one of the teenagers like, Pastor Tim, why are you putting up signs where the bathroom is? I've grown up here my whole life. I know where the bathroom is. I'm like, well, the sign's not for you. It's for guests who come, so that they know where the bathrooms are. And be sensitive as to what it looks like. So there was one church. It was a church plant. And in this particular church plant, they were renting a very unique facility. We have to do that as church planters. We don't always get the best facilities. We have to do with what we have. And in this particular facility, their church plant, their facility was designed in a way that they had only one bathroom, and it was right there on the top right side of the sanctuary. There was a door right there. Now, they were in a building project, so there was no doorknob or lock. So when it was time to go to the bathroom, if you did not go between services, you got up in the middle of the service and you literally walked, excuse me, Pastor, I know you guys are having prayer, and you walk over to the door. Now the door doesn't lock and it does not have a doorknob on it. How do I know if somebody's in there or not? They literally had a wire coat hanger stuck through the open door that said open and closed on it. And so I remember when I saw that, does open mean I can go in? Or does open mean that the door is open? I didn't quite understand what open and closed, how it was defined. So I had to go. And I stood there and I waited until I saw somebody come out, because I hadn't remembered if I'd seen somebody go in. That's a real extreme example, but it's very real. There was another church, also a church plant. Theirs was over here. They were building it. It was a former ballet studio. It had no bathroom. The facility they bought the bathroom side. They had a kitchen but didn't have a bathroom, so they were building one bathroom right there. It was literally plywood with no ceiling. You could hear everything going on inside there. Those are some real true story, real true. Those are some extreme examples, but our goal is to make people feel comfortable and in all of its forms. So,
You would think.
yeah, you would think. Those are here in the U.S. Those aren't in third world countries. Those are. Yeah, so another great thing to consider in your physical plant is a resource center. This is some kind of a welcome resource center, some kind of a place where people can get more information. When people come and they have a good experience, they're going to want to know, what do you believe is a church? How do I become a member? Do you have anything else going on? And providing a resource center, a place where that information is available. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then the church's available space. This is something older churches do not think about. Here's the general rule of thumb. Write this down. When you have reached 70% capacity of any space, you are full. You're full. Okay, so Rick, thank you very much for encouraging everybody to kind of sit in the middle. But when you came in, you didn't want to sit in the middle. You wanted to spread out, right? And generally speaking, when you're 70% full, you're sitting kind of close to people. And people like to be spread out. You can have a special event like a Christmas program or a wedding or graduation where everybody's willing to get in shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee. But generally speaking, people don't like that. So when you get to 70% capacity, it's time to start thinking, how are we going to continue to grow? Do we need to go to multiple services? Do we need to plant a church? What are we going to do to be able to do that? Because you'll hardly ever get beyond that in a regular set of numbers. And this applies to all spaces. Parking is a huge space. Back in the day, a whole family of 5 or 6 would come in one car. And now it's an average of 2 people per car that comes. So the number of parking spaces in older churches are a whole lot fewer than they used to have. because people are bringing more vehicles to come. And if you run, and this has been a problem I've had in many of my churches, when you run out of parking, you're like, why can't we fill up the sanctuary? The sanctuary isn't the problem. There's no place for people to park. So we've always had to have a relationship with the daycare or the church or another church to be able to use their parking because we have overflow. And then we encourage all of our ministry leaders, all of our leaders in the church, please park over next door and walk over. Leave these places for new people or older people or for young families, but let us leaders commit so that we provide that spacing. And then we were able to grow the other. Sabbath school space, any space, fellowship hall space, once you reach that certain capacity, it's full. So be considering that in your thing. So there's a resource called Curb Appeal. You want to write this down. I don't think it's in your outline. Curb Appeal. It is a self-evaluation tool. It's divided into 7 categories and will allow you to go through and completely evaluate your facilities. And it looks at your signage, it looks at both interior, exterior, everything you put in print, technology, and verbal, how you're communicating, nonverbal communication, etc. Just gives you a chance to really have an exterior perspective, somebody else's external perspective as to how you're doing and what you may need to focus on the physical plant. Being with physical plant and being a church planter, where we just came from, Beltsville Church, just north of D.C. in Maryland, about 11 miles from the White House. We were a growing church, a strong church, multiple services. We decided to plant, and we chose to do what we call a multi-site church plant. So we didn't just send a bunch of leaders off and they went and planted their own church. Nothing wrong with that. That's great. That's what I do now, is investing in people to do that. We decided to do another location. So we're one church, then in 2, now 3 locations, not counting our 4th online location. We've planted other locations. And the very first location that we planted, campus that we planted, was the Tech Road campus, which is literally across the highway from the General Conference office. And Andrea, my wife, she chose to be one of the leaders at that location. I was overseeing all the campuses. She's a leader of that. And we had the opportunity from the ground floor to build our hospitality program from the ground up, literally, and make it a welcoming place to connect with people. And it was an incredible success. So I wanted to have her share some stories of how we applied some of these things. So as it relates to the physical plant and the church's image, she'll do some sharing now.
Okay, thank you. So with Tech Road, we named it Tech Road because it was actually on a road called Tech Road. Tech Road campus is what we called it because it was a campus of the Beltsville Seventh-day Adventist Church. And Tim and the campus pastor, his name is Pastor Will, Tim and Will, yes. Oh, nice. He's wonderful. Nice. Anyway. Oh, that's great. That's nice. Yeah, he's wonderful. He's wonderful. Him and his family. And so anyway, they went and looked around at all these different facilities because it's so difficult, because with church planting, sometimes you don't have a lot of funds and you're trying to get a great space in a good location. So it's really challenging. So what they came up with was we were going to be planting a new campus it was called the Hollywood Ballroom. So this is actually an Adventist church going to be held in a ballroom. What do they call that?
Disco ball.
Disco ball included. So, we would have to transform that space. And they did jazzercise on Saturday morning until 10 o'clock, I had to think. And so 10 o'clock, those people would leave, and it was like we had a team, and we had 45 minutes to transform this ballroom into church. And we did, every single Sabbath. It was very difficult, lots of planning and everything, but we had it down to a science, which is what you have to do. But we wanted to make it welcoming. We didn't want people to come in and think, oh, so this is where they do dancing and, all this other things. We wanted them to realize this is church. This is church for us. And so even though it even had a bar, which of course we didn't use, but we did use that for fixing potlucks. But anyway, so we wanted to transform this into church. And so that meant draperies, to do Sabbath school rooms, to have, different children's areas, to have a hospitality area, all this, and plus the worship service. And so this is kind of what we did. This is service here. So you can see how we made it welcoming. The drapery, you can see a little bit of a light there, but we brought our own lights in. We had hardwood floors. We kind of had a little platform. We actually put in the projector and the screen ourselves. So that's one thing. And Tim was talking about signage. So this ballroom was in the middle of like a plaza. So it wasn't like just one building. This building had many different things. There was like a florist. There was another church in the same building, just down the road, from our, but in the same kind of location. And so how do you find this place? And so we really invested in a lot of signage because there were two ways to get in. And so we wanted to make sure that on Sabbath morning, people weren't driving around looking for the place because it was actually a little hard to find. So there's one sign that our deacons are putting out. And then we had this. We wanted to make sure everybody knew where we were. So you can see we have somebody by the door. We have 3 welcome signs there. When you come in to the building, we also have these signages because where you're standing, when you're looking actually into our sanctuary, but from standing, you're in our hospitality area because we wanted to have different areas. We didn't want it just to be one big thing. We wanted to have a lobby, our hospitality area, and we'll show you more of that. I don't know if you want me to share the next slide or not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the hospitality area.
Okay. So this is our hospitality area, one of the pictures of our hospitality area. We made it very inviting. We had flowers. We had food. Everybody was welcome. You see the man in the wheelchair. We have elderly people. We have young people. We have much diversity. Very much welcoming for people. And that's what we wanted. We wanted, when you walked in, you felt comfortable. And also another picture is this beautiful mother and daughter here in our hospitality area, feeling welcome. You can see they have name tags on, and we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. So this is just, you want where your church is. You want people to be able to find you. And when they come in the door, you want them to know where they are. We also had signage, and I didn't have it, but it's like when you came in, it told you where the Sabbath school classes room were, where the restrooms were, where the sanctuary was, so that you knew. It's like you walk in, there's greeters here to help you, but you also know, oh, okay, yeah, I do need to use the restroom, or, oh, okay, I go that way to the sanctuary. So that you felt comfortable instead of just walking in and kind of being kind of a deer in the headlights, because we've all been there. We've all felt that way. And sometimes you're okay with that, and sometimes you're not. And you don't want your guests to come in and they don't know where they are or where to go.
Very good. So just here's the thing to consider. When you last went to the hospital and you had to go to a particular room in the hospital for tests, for labs, for whatever, and you showed up at a hospital that you don't normally go to, and you had to find your way through that big building to the one location you are, what was that like for you? That's not what we want our guests to experience, right? And so hospitals are trying to put more signage up and everything else so that people know where they're going. Or if you go to the airport and have to go in one gate and have to find your way to another, that's not what we want people to feel like. All right, so let's talk about your hosts. Now, I'll say this, I don't care whether you call them hosts or greeters. Doesn't matter to me what you call them. What does matter to me is how they view their ministry. Now, I used to be adamant, we don't call them greeters, because they're doing more than greeting. They're hosting. Now I don't fight over it as much, but what does matter to me is how they view their ministry. Let me explain this. So let's say it's a Friday afternoon, And I'm in my house, and I am making a homemade lasagna. I've got my apron on. I'm making my own homemade ricotta cheese out of tofu that's just seasoned just right. I'm layering all those layers on there, getting everything nice and perfect, and there's a doorbell ring. I really don't have time for company. I'm busy. I'm in the middle of stuff. I have company coming over tomorrow. So I wipe my hands off on my apron. I make my way to the door. I open the door, and there's this girl selling Girl Scout cookies. So I greet her. Hi, what can I do for you today? And she goes through her spiel about Thin Mints and other things, and I buy some Thin Mints. I'm kind. I greet her. I buy some cookies, and I send her on her way. I have been a good greeter. I greeted, I was nice, I smiled, and I sent her wherever she needed to go next. So I go back in, and I finish making my lasagna. Now it's Sabbath afternoon, and you're coming to my house for lunch. I have an amazing lasagna, salad, garlic bread, homemade lemonade that my son has made. It is spectacular. The doorbell rings. I'm not surprised because you're coming over. I go over the door, I open the door, and I welcome you. Hey, so glad you're here. Come on in. I take your coat. I hang it up. If I've got other guests that are there, I introduce you to them just to make sure you know who they are. And if you come to my house any other day, I promise you it's going to be hot or cold because I'm cheap. And if it's cold outside, it's cold inside. Ask my mother-in-law. If it's hot outside, it's going to be hot inside because I'm not going to make it comfortable. I'm going to save every penny I can. I'm cheap. But when you come to my house, I'm going to turn up or down the temperature so it feels just fine when you come in. I ask if you would like something to drink, and I give you something to drink. Because you're from the South, I'm guessing you're going to want ice in that drink, so I'll ask if you'd like ice in your drink. And I seat you over, and we sit down. Now, I'll have contacted you ahead of time to know whether you have any allergies and or whether there's anything you really don't like to eat. Because if you don't like broccoli, I'm not going to fix broccoli because I want you to have a good experience at my home. Why? Because I want you and I to connect. I want you and I to be friends and to get to know each other. And if you're not enjoying lunch at my house because I'm serving something you don't like and you're allergic to, we're going to have a really difficult time connecting. That's the difference between a greeter and a host. A greeter welcomes you, shakes your hand, gives a bulletin, and moves on to doing whatever else. A host recognizes we have guests coming. Is everything ready for the guests that are coming? And when they come, they make them feel comfortable. They make them connect. They help them connect. They make sure they know what they're going. Two things people want to know: where do I worship and where do I go to the bathroom? So if you notice somebody you don't know, right, at their first time here, you just tell them that information right off because they want to know that. And you're connecting with them. So that's the mindset, the difference between a host and a greeter.
Awesome, and I just thank you, But you know what? Good to see you. Bye. Wow, well, look who's here. Wow. Good to see you guys. Yeah. Good to see you. How was your week?
Oh, pretty good.
It was good?
Yeah.
How do you like the weather?
I don't.
Isn't it awesome?
No.
And I just praise God for you. It's always, I miss you when you're not here, but you're always here. But I'm so glad to see you. Yes, I'm glad to see you. And I just love you guys. I'm just glad to see you guys. I'm glad to see you guys. Okay? I'm looking forward to it. I will sit at your table with you and make sure we enjoy each other. All right? All right. That'll be cool. That'd be good. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that you save me a seat when I get to your table. All right. I'm looking forward to it. Don't you disappoint me. I stayed in a long time, and I really think you should, because we have some fabulous people. I think you should, and you depend on people too. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's so good. We're good to see you. So it is great. All right. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Well, all right. Well, good morning. Nice to see you. Enjoy the service. Enjoy the service. All right. Well, hey, handsome. How you doing? Good to see you. and Dad.
How you doing?
I tell you, so good to see you guys.
Did you notice how she treated the other people other than Jimmy? She treated Jimmy differently than she treated the people before and after. Now, just a point of reference here. The woman who chose to volunteer to be our greeter, that was like the fifth or sixth time we had to take, because I had to keep telling, you're being too nice. You need to calm down. But that's how I would want to treat. I know, but we're trying to show the bad side. You know, you're a great greeter. I don't want you to show the good side. I want you to show the bad side. So that was her worst impression she could give, which is actually still not too bad. But the point is, there were people that she knew, and as a greeter, this is my chance to connect with the people that I know, and then here's somebody I don't know, give a bulletin so I can get on to the people that I do know. And that's what we want to avoid. For those that are hosts, it's those serving see themselves as hosts, not just greeters. A greeter greets, says happy Sabbath, glad you're here, gives a bulletin, and moves on. A host is there to make people feel comfortable. Make people feel at ease. They help to minister to them, help them to connect. So when guests come, research has shown that guests are generally looking for three things. The first thing is the friendliness and warmth of the church. Why does it care? Why do they care whether it's friendly or warmth? I don't mean warmth as in temperature warmth. I mean like welcoming. Why? Because they're wanting to know, can I connect here? Because they're wanting to connect with God, be in relationship with God, and in order to do that, they want to be part of a community of faith that has a relationship with God. So if they can't feel like they can connect with these people, then they're not going to come back. Even though what they want is to connect with God, not necessarily people, but they know intuitively that it's through people that they connect with God. All right, second thing is the character of the worship service. We'll talk more about this in a minute, but they're wanting to see the character of the service. This is not the style of the worship service. I was talking to one person the other day, and they said, oh, that church is a celebration church. I was like, do people even use that term anymore? I mean, that's like such a thing from like the early 90s that we talked about church as a celebration church. And today, the churches that are like traditional church services are doing the music from those old celebration churches back in the day, right? Which I thought was interesting. This is not about contemporary music, traditional music, organ, or electric guitars. It's when people come, what is the experience of the worship? What's that character? We'll talk more about that. We have a whole section about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. At a place for children. If they have children, is there a place for children? Because if their kids aren't comfortable, if their kids aren't connecting, if there's no place for them, then it's going to be challenging for them. And real important thing is providing host or greeting, whatever you want to call them, training. Don't just tell somebody, give them a bulletin, smile, shake a hand, and say happy Sabbath. So there's way, way more involved with that. Generally speaking, on Sabbath morning, there's a variety of different people who come to church. You have the regular church member who comes all the time, almost every week. You have the person that comes every once in a great while. They're a member there, but they only come every once in a while for whatever reason. You have the guest that comes to church who is there for the first time and they live in the community. You have the guest that comes because they're in town visiting family or friends or old vacation or whatever, and that's why they're there. So who they are will determine how you are ministering to them as a host. So how do you assert who they are so that you can best minister to them? Because obviously when somebody shows up who's been worshiping at your church regularly for several years, they don't need to know where the bathroom's at. But your first-time guest does. So how do we let them know? How do we find out? How do we ask that? Do we just ask everybody, is this your first time here? Well, some greeters are afraid to do something like that because what ends up happening is they say, are you kidding me? I've been attending this church forever. Right? My grandparents are one of the charter members. My dad put the spackle on that wall. Of course, I haven't been to church in 18 months. But so some people are afraid to ask those kinds of questions because they're afraid they're going to get that response. Training provides that. It shares how you assert and how you help people with that. The goal is, to, again, as a host, making people when they come in to feel comfortable. They are strangers, right? They're not used to this. So how do we help them feel the most comfortable they can so that they can experience God while they're here so that they'll come back and end up developing relationships with other people in the church and can begin or continue the discipleship process in their life. Now have Andrea share a few more experiences.
Okay, so when we're talking about hosts, greeters, whatever you want to call them, you want people that really want to connect. Now, again, they don't have to be extroverts. They can be introverts, but they truly have a caring personality for people and for people that are new. Again, at Tech Road, this is the guy, Guillermo. He is an elder. And Rosie, his wife, they were some of our greeting team. I was one of the hospitality leaders, and we didn't have one or two greeters. We had a team, and it was a team every single week. And we had different teams, but it wasn't just one or two people. And literally, most of us who were on the team, if we were in town, we were there. It was just part of who we were. And so you would have two people here at the door, because what happens is you have somebody come in, whether it's a person you know or if it's a guest, and this person, let's just say Guillermo, he's talking to somebody. A young man comes in and he's talking to him, but then you have other church members come in, or you have another guest. You want somebody else there that's going to be able to talk also, so that they don't just slip in. Okay, so it's nice to have that. Again, that welcoming atmosphere. Okay, this is it's me, but this is our hospitality, one of our hospitality tables. We provided food. Is food necessary? Not necessarily, but we just feel like so many times when Jesus connected with people, there was food involved. And food helps people relax. People share. You have a fellowship meal here today. It was wonderful. People connected with us. We connected with other people. It was pleasant. That's what Jesus did too. And we wanted people to feel connected. We wanted people to be able to spend time with each other. When food is involved, people stop and slow down. Whereas if you just come in, hi, happy Sabbath, and I'm on my way. Or I don't even have time to talk to a guest. But when there's food involved, maybe I'll stay here for a little bit. We provided finger foods. We did this for a reason. So there was less involved. You would think this is a lot. This is a lot. We did grapes every Sabbath. Sometimes we would do oranges too. We had different kinds of muffins. We had bagels. We had cream cheese. We had all kinds of drinks you can imagine for people to feel comfortable. This was a lot of work, I will not lie. But we had teams that would do the shopping and things like that. But one of the things, when we left Beltsville, our elders at Tech Road took me to dinner, and they got me gifts. And my favorite gift was a muffin tin. And the reason that was my favorite gift is because one day our hospitality team was there, and we were talking, and there's this little boy and his mom, and he was like, Mommy, I want to go to the muffin church. And it was just kind of like our little thing. It was they called us the muffin church because we had little muffins. And so, anyway, our elders gave me a muffin tin. It was precious to me because, it just meant a lot. But here's our setup. It's welcoming. We have flowers. We have different drinks that you can enjoy. And it's a lot to set up. But once you get it, once you understand what you want to do as a church, again, this is kind of elaborate. Some people see this and they're like, wow, that's a lot of work. And it was. But that doesn't mean you have to do that much, but just to make people feel welcome. And we have a hospitality hour area. People just feel free. Some people come. A lot of people don't eat breakfast before they come, or a lot of people were involved in ministry, and we got there really early to help set up. Well, we can take 5 minutes to eat. Whatever your preference is, it's just nice to have something for people to just connect. How was your week? And they have this time to do this. I did want to share a quick story. A few slides ago, I showed a table, and there were some elderly people here, and I showed you a man in a wheelchair. He was a patient of mine. I did in-home physical therapy, and his name was Dennis. And, I saw him a couple times a week for several weeks. I worked for Adventist healthcare, so I had the freedom to talk about religion if I wanted to, if I chose to, if I thought it was appropriate. And we would talk about things. He was not an Adventist, but he loved God. He hadn't been to church for years, never been to an Adventist church, wanted to come. And so he had a roommate, Carl. And he asked Carl if he would if Carl could bring Dennis to church. And Carl was very gruff, very loud, very outspoken. You knew exactly what he was thinking because he would tell you. And he had a huge ring on every finger. He had a big old belly, and he would wear shorts everywhere. I don't care if it was 10 degrees out, and a tank top usually. He's a retired Navy, very politically charged. But, you know, he was very nice to me when I was treating Dennis in the home, and he said he would bring Dennis to church. Now, when he first bring Dennis, I mean, literally, he'd just bring him in the door and walk out. And I would just have to almost run up to him and say, "Hi, Carl, hi," and just out the door. And so over months and a few years, you know, he would come in, and then he would bring Dennis, and I would take Dennis into the sanctuary. And it got to be where Carl would sometimes stay in the hospitality area and just sit and talk to people, which was huge for him to be in a church because he was actually a Buddhist. But for him to come in and sit, and his views were very different than most everybody, and he was fine with letting you know that and would argue with you about everything. But a lot of people there understood what our values were with trying to show God's love to him. And we left Pennsylvania, and he took us to dinner. Dennis since passed away, but he would still come. He would call, want to know, and the first thing he'd want to know, how's Tim? How's the church? You know, and he wouldn't really come into church, but we had outdoor service sometimes, and he would come to outdoor service. Anyway, it was just a testimony to our team, because our team made him feel welcome. Even though if you look at him, he did not look like a Seventh-day Adventist. He wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist. He looked far from a Seventh-day Adventist or a Christian or anything like that. But he saw God's love through us. And there was time he was going to go through open heart surgery. And I asked him if I could pray with him. And I did. And he was, I want your prayers. And he welcomed that. And it's just a testimony that what your team can do, what your hospitality team can do for you. So, all right. So we want to talk about questions. We want to talk about our application time, and this is on page 5. I'll just have him do it. Okay. So our first question is what? Click this. Sorry.
Oh, was it not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Application on page 5. I think I want you to kind of get into little groups for this, just kind of like you did before. Our questions are, what do people say or think about our church in the community? So get in groups of your church, okay? So if some of you are from North, some of you are from First, from Grace, get into those groups and talk about these. What do people say or think about our church in the community? Do people even know you exist? Is our physical plant receptive to guests? And what might we need to focus on first? And then also, what do we need to do to improve our greeter and host ministry? We've got about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to talk about that. Thank you.
He's purifying heaven's temple. Hallelujah. Oh, hallelujah. In preparation for his returning, for those who love and follow him. He He seals my bond with him in the sanctuary up in heaven. He makes provision for me in the sanctuary at the mercy seat in the Holy of Holies, in the Holy of Holies, with me. He's blotting out my sin in the sanctuary. He seals my bond with him in the sanctuary up in heaven. He makes provision for me in the sanctuary, in the sanctuary, in the sanctuary. In the
I have fixed my mind on another time, on another time. And here I mean to stand until God gives me more life. And that is today until He comes. I have fixed my mind on another time, on another time. I have set my course on the narrow way, on the narrow way. For I know the time is close at hand, for which I watch and pray. And that is today until He comes. I have set my course on the narrow way, on the narrow way. Even so, Lord, come quickly. This is my fervent prayer, for I've got a glimpse of glory, and I'm longing to be there.
Conversation, and then we're going to take about a 15-minute break. If you need to use the restroom, stand up, stretch a little bit. I just went out, walked outside a little bit real quick just to move a little bit, and then we're going to begin again at 3:45. The restrooms are just down this hallway right here. Follow the signs.
Then shall the Son of Man appear. The Son of Man appear. Even so, Lord, come quickly. This is my fervent prayer, for I've caught a glimpse of glory, and I'm longing to be there. For I've caught a glimpse of glory, and I'm longing to be there. I have fixed my mind on another time, on another
Marvel not at what I say. By and by will come the day when the souls asleep in Christ will hear His voice and will rise, will rise unto the resurrection, unto the resurrection of life.
Just as
Sure the hour will come when descends Jerusalem. Then the dead who lived in sin will hear His voice to the water to be baptized. Bury me with Jesus, the crucified. Plunge me in the fountain, and may I rise with open eyes. Take me to the water to be baptized. What a joy and blessing to be baptized as a testimony of a work inside. Jesus' blood has cleansed me, and to new life He lifts me. Rise, I've come to the water to be baptized. Take me to the water, to be baptized. Bury me with Jesus, the crucified. Plunge me in the fountain, and may I rise with open eyes. Take me to the water to be baptized. I've come to the water to be baptized. Now is the day of salvation. Today, sinner without hesitation, pray. Christ will hear you. Christ is near you, though you've gone astray. Now is the day of salvation. Let Him wash your sins away. Now is the day of salvation. Today, sinner without hesitation, pray. Christ will hear you. Christ is near you, though you've gone astray. Now is the day of salvation. salvation. Let him wash your sins away. Let him wash your sins away.
Again, those of you joining us online, thank you so much for being here with us as we continue in our last presentation together. We're going to be jumping in on what we call session 3 on page 6. I do have a quick question for my wife because I just thought of something. At Louisville First, the name of the gentleman that we ended up baptizing, you know who I'm talking about. If you could think of it and remind me when it comes, I want to share his story. All right, so now we're going to talk about everything kind of we've talked about so far is the philosophical, theological, and now before the worship service even begins, right, just kind of leading up to that, training and spending time with your hosts, really getting them to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it will make a huge difference. And just kind of, for me, the illustration, the difference is how you treat somebody who comes to your door versus somebody you've invited to come to eat at your house. All right, so let's continue in Jimmy's story.
Okay, Lord, I'm here. Not so sure that I fit in, but I'm here to hear what you have to say.
Morning, church family. Happy Sabbath. I'm glad you're all here today. I'd like to make a few announcements. If you take your bulletin and open it.
Okay, Lord, announcements. I guess I don't have to know everything that's going on here, but I'm here. Vespers? What's Vespers? I have no idea. I'm really lost. I don't have to understand it all. I'm here. Wow, that's confusing. Wow, I know Mom's been praying, but I don't know that this is going to work out. This just may not be for me. Oh, we're going to sing. I guess we stand to sing. What do we sing out of? Hymnal? No hymnal for me. Maybe he'll share. Not quite sure I get this. But I'm here, Lord. Prayer. I can do this, Lord. Whoa. What's everybody doing? I guess we kneel. Okay, Lord, I can do that. What's this? Envelope. I don't have an envelope. What do you want? I don't have an envelope. Lord, I'm here to connect with you, and I just don't get it. I don't feel like I belong. I just, maybe this was a mistake.
All right, so we want to talk about the character of the worship service. We're not talking about the style of music. It has nothing to do with the style. Generally speaking, your guest doesn't care what kind of music you have. They can listen to whatever music they want to listen to all week long on whatever device they have. And they're coming to worship God, and if you choose to do it through bluegrass or country or classical or organ or electric guitars, doesn't matter to most guests. It's the other Adventists that have a chip on their shoulder that care. The guests don't really care. What matters to them is the character of your service. I like what Ellen White says. She says, and she says this in kind of her old English American language, never allow the interest to flag. Right? The interest is the person who's coming, who's interested in God, the guest, and never allow them to flag. Don't miss the opportunity. Don't miss out on connecting with Him. Devise methods that will bring a deep and living interest into the new churches. All connected with the church. How many connected with the church? All connected with the church should feel it an individual responsibility. All should work to the utmost of their ability to strengthen the church and make the meetings so full of life that outsiders will feel attracted and interested. All should feel it a sin to let the interest wane when we have such sacred, solemn truths from the living oracles to repeat over and over again. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the character of the worship service. That guests should be able to come and recognize that these people are worshiping God, and they love worshiping God. However that's done, you don't have to change your style, but it's making it to where it's so interesting that the guest is interested. If your guests are not interested, then you're missing the opportunity of proclaiming the truths, the solemn truths from the living oracles to people over and over again. You're missing the opportunity over and over again. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the character of the worship service. True spiritual seekers are looking for God and relationships. They're looking for God and relationships. True spiritual seekers are looking to see if they fit in. And God ministers to the guest through the church. So I did a series of meetings like this in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania. And during one of the breaks, a pastor's wife comes up to me. And she's nearly crying. And she said, I have to tell you a story. She said, when we were pastoring, and then we accepted a call to be missionaries overseas. I think they were in South America somewhere. And like in the jungle, like, Adventist Frontier Mission missionaries, like in the middle of nowhere missionaries. Not like, at a university somewhere, which is still mission work, but a little different. And we did that and raised our kids there. And when we came back, our kids went to college, Adventist college, and when they graduated, they didn't move back home, they moved out to begin their careers. And one of our daughters ended up graduating for whatever degree, I don't know, or what college, and she ended up moving far away from where they live, and she intended to go to church, but she just was busy getting moved in, getting settled in, and she just didn't go to church. And so the mother's telling me, I'd call my daughter every week to see how she's doing, and I would ask her, have you found a church yet? Years went by, and she hadn't found a church yet. So she's praying for her Jimmy, right? And so she tells me that finally her daughter says, I'm going to church this Sabbath. So the daughter looked, and where she lived, the closest Seventh-day Adventist church was about 30 minutes away. So this is what the daughter does. She gets up Sabbath morning, early. She goes to her closet, and she looks for a dress or a skirt to wear. She doesn't wear them anymore. She wears other attire. She chooses not to wear her earrings, which she now wears. She chooses not to put them in. She puts on less makeup than she normally would put on to get ready to go to church. My question for you is this: why would this girl do that? This is not how she normally dresses. This is not how much normally she adorns herself. This is not how she normally puts makeup on. Why, when she is choosing to go to a Seventh-day Adventist church, would she choose to not dress herself like she normally does? I'll tell you, it's not so that she doesn't offend somebody. It's not so she doesn't get in an argument with somebody. It's because she doesn't know how accepting or unaccepting this Seventh-day Adventist church is, and she wants to be accepted. And she will choose not to allow how she normally dresses to be a barrier with fitting in with other people. So she gets up, she gets in her car, she drives the half an hour to church. She gets to the church, and the church is locked. Not like front doors locked and you got to go to the back. I mean like boarded up, locked. The church has shut down. It's closed its doors. It no longer exists. She gets in the car and she drives home. Her mom is like on pins and needles, right? I mean, she's like knowing her daughter's going to church, right? She's been praying for her daughter for years. She's finally going to church, and she waits to hear, and she hears back from her daughter, and her daughter tells her nobody was there. So what are you going to do? Well, I found that the closest Adventist church is an hour away. Well, are you going to go? She says, yeah, I'm going to go. The next Sabbath, she does the very same thing, and she drives an hour to the closest Seventh-day Adventist church. She gets there. It's a small little community church. It's not a lot of people. And she goes in, and nobody talks to her. She gets there in time for Sabbath school. She sits in a Sabbath school class. Nobody connects with her. Sabbath school is over. She has to get up and go sit in a different place. She sits in another place, and nobody talks to her. After the service is over, she lingers by, and nobody speaks with her. Finally, she's one of the last to leave, and as she's going out, the preacher is standing there at the door, and she goes to shake the preacher's hand, and she says, "Happy Sabbath," and the preacher responds with a grunt. She walks out the door, she gets in her car, and she cries. She gets home, she calls her mom crying, and says, "I'm just not going to go back to an Adventist church." Now, how do you think that mom felt? Devastated. Why did she get up and choose to go to that church? Because she wanted to connect. Now, what she told her mom told her husband, who was a pastor, and he found out what that church was, and that Monday was on the phone calling that pastor and to find out what was going on, because he was ticked. And he called that pastor to find out the pastor was on vacation, and it was an elder who was there. But that pastor raked the other pastor over the coals about how would you want your children to be treated when they visited the church. At the conversation we were having, that had happened a couple of years before, and the daughter had still yet to go back to church again. It's the character of that service that makes the huge difference. It's the feeling like God is being worshipped here, and people want to be here, and people are engaging God, and they're engaging each other in their faith together. That's what matters. That's what takes place. I love how Ellen White said this here in Testimonies to the Church. These admonitions, talking about hospitality, these admonitions have been strangely neglected. Even among those who profess to be Christians, true hospitality is little exercised. Among our own people, the opportunity of showing hospitality is not regarded as it should be, as a privilege and a blessing. There is altogether too little sociability. People come in, they worship, and they leave. And that's not church. Right? Paul says that we should get together, worship, assemble together for worship weekly, every Sabbath, right? And all the more as you see the day drawing near, right? Why? To encourage each other in our faith. That's why Paul says we need to be gathering together to encourage, not to just hear a sermon, but to encourage each other. And that happens by sociability, connecting together. Discipleship happens through relationships, and we are providing an environment where that can take place, where people can connect and grow in their faith. All right, moving on to session 4.